Hello everybody, my name is Cole Doherty, and I will be presenting drug overdose deaths in Connecticut from 2012 to 2018. So an outline is, first I'll explain the data set, which will be consisting of how I organized it, why I chose it, and if there's any wrangling I had to do. Next I'll have my questions, the three initial questions that I had before making the visualizations, and if these questions get answered over time, if there's any follow-up questions to these initial questions, things like that. Third will be the visualizations and the discoveries. I will explain the discoveries of these visualizations while I'm explaining them. Finally, I'll have a conclusion where I want to have a take-home message for you guys and essentially what I want you to get out of my presentation. So the dataset, the structure is broken up into many different subcategories for these drug overdose deaths. So it takes a bunch of individuals in Connecticut, almost all residents, and the race that they are, age, gender, where they lived when they died, a lot of different things that show the specifics of that drug overdose death. The inspiration behind it was that I was looking through a lot of the data sets that we were given, and I didn't really find any of them interesting, so I went on Kaggle and searched for hours, and there was a lot of interesting ones on Kaggle, but I finally found one that I wanted to do, and it was this one. There was no wrangling. Everything within the data set was pretty clean cut, and it was very easy to work with. Questions. So the first three initial questions I had before making these visualizations were between each of the different drugs, which one has the highest amount of deaths? Do females or males have a higher death rate? And which race has the highest amount of drug overdose deaths? So I was curious between the different drugs, the sex, and the race, those three categories. And I'll explain the evolution if these questions get answered while I go through my presentation. So how I made the graphs, they're all made in Tableau. This is a specific one just for the different races, and I put the race in column, and I put the fentanyl in rows, and I filtered it by color, a red, green, gold diverging. So the higher the amount of deaths, represented by red, and the lesser amount of deaths were represented by green. So they're all made through Tableau, and this is my first one. This shows the total overdose deaths for different drugs in Connecticut for that 6-year span. And as you can see, it is fentanyl, heroin, cocaine are the top 3 drugs. And almost all the visualizations I will be making will compare these top 3 drugs to one another. This shows for cities in Connecticut, fentanyl and heroin comparing to one another, and it's Hartford. That is the biggest city in Connecticut. This one shows the counties, and it is Hartford again, ironically. And for heroin, it is New Haven, which is also another very large county. This one shows the sex between female and male. As you can see, female doesn't even break over 200 deaths from this 6-year span. Same with heroin. And for fentanyl, for males, seems like it's rising very steadily at an alarming rate, while heroin was rising and now it dipped a little bit in this last 2 years. This shows the location of the death for heroin in the city of Hartford. This is a pretty fun one I made. It is just residents and hospitals seem like they take the chunk of it. These next 3 graphs show the amount of deaths in each age range for the 6-year span. This first one shows cocaine deaths. And as you can see, it is in between 40s and 50s for the highest amount of cocaine deaths. For heroin, it is a little bit of a younger drug, in between 20s and 30s. And for fentanyl, it is in between 20s and 30s as well. It's very interesting to see that cocaine has the highest in between 40s to 50s. I would have thought that it would have been in the 20s to 30s. It's like more of a college party drug, so I would have thought that it would have been a little bit lower, but guess not. It's pretty surprising. Fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine deaths. This is just showing the amount of deaths per year for each drug, and as you can see, fentanyl is rising very steadily, and heroin rising, and then it dipped suddenly, and for cocaine it was rising and now it seems to be flattening out. this is this is when I was showing how I made the graphs. I'm coming back to this again. Fentanyl deaths for different races. White is much higher than any other race, and this is a little bit biased. One of my initial questions was to ask which race has the highest amount of drug deaths, and it is whites, but it is a little biased because in Connecticut it is mostly white people that live there, not a lot of minorities, so it would make sense that Hispanic and Black are a lot lower. So those are a lot of the discoveries I made while making these different visualizations. Most of the original questions that I had were answered. Fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine have the highest amount of deaths. Males, the second question I had was, do females or males have a higher death rate? And it was shown that males have a much higher death rate than compared to females. And my last question was, which race has the highest amount of drug overdose deaths? And it was white people, which didn't come as a surprise again to me. I would like to see if opioids and opiates overtake the drug fentanyl for the highest amount of deaths of any race or gender in Connecticut because of the opioid crisis that's going on now. And also another thing I'd like to see is, this only goes up till 2018, so it'd be interesting to see if any of these other drugs surpass any of them within this 4-year span. So the conclusion, the main core argument that I found is that white middle-aged men who live in the most populous cities in Connecticut, Hartford, Bridgeport, and New Haven have the highest drug overdose deaths compared to any other demographic. And finally, just don't do drugs. You see how many deaths there are. It's bad. Thank you.